Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm the Wellness Program Administrator with Georgia State University's Employee Development and Wellness Services. By trade, I am a registered dietitian, so I'm always on the hunt for new recipes that can help us fit better nutrition into our day-to-day lives. Before we get started, I do want to cover just a couple quick things about the platform. We are going to be recording today's session, so you can view it again at a later time or share it with a colleague who may not have been able to attend. We upload recordings of most of our events to our EDWS YouTube page, so we'll be sure to share a link to that and some follow-up communications. Throughout today's presentation, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, please make use of the WebEx chat feature. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll be sure to address any questions related to the recipe or the demonstration at the end of the presentation. I'm joined today by my colleague, Cheryl Johnson-Ransaw, who will be monitoring the chat to help out with any technical issues you may encounter. So if you have audio or video issues, please make sure you send your comment to all panelists. This will make sure that Cheryl can see it as well and help troubleshoot any issues that may pop up. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive into today's recipe. So today we're going to be making an open-faced broccoli cheese sandwich, which is kind of like a broccoli grilled cheese if you've ever made one of those before. But we're doing a couple things to the recipe. By making it an open-faced sandwich, we're really going to be able to pack a lot more vegetable content into it and also reduce the carbohydrates a little bit so that we can enjoy that cheesy goodness, pull in more broccoli, and keep the calories very, very reasonable. In terms of equipment, we're going to need a cutting board and a knife, a couple mixing bowls, and then we are going to make use of the oven today. So I've gone ahead and preheated my oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The other step that I've gone ahead and done is I have lightly toasted 4 slices of bread. So this recipe will make 4 open-faced sandwiches, so 1 piece of bread each. And a quick note about the bread, you can actually toast this in the oven as it's preheating if you'd want. I just used a toaster oven, made it simple, but that's entirely up to you. We're going to very lightly toast it. And when I say lightly toast it, we want it to start browning slightly, get a little bit firmer, but we don't want to get it super dark because we are going to put it in the oven later with the rest of the ingredients to have the cheese melt over it, and we don't want the toast to get overdone. Now, in terms of bread selection, you can really use a lot of different types here, but I would recommend doing a fairly thick or hearty slice. If you see bread at the store that's like a 60-calorie bread that's really thinly sliced or small, that's not quite what we're looking for today. You can do that, but you're not going to be able to fit quite as much broccoli on the piece, so the number of portions you get may shift slightly. But the biggest thing I want to point out today is that we are working with 100% whole wheat bread. Now, the reason for this is whole wheat or whole grain items are healthier for us. Whenever you are shopping, you want to look for the words whole grain, but also the 100%. Hopefully you can see that on there. That is crucial because you can get a bread that maybe is 50% whole grain or 25% whole grain. We're looking for 100% whole grain. The reason being that that type of bread will have more fiber, more protein, and more B vitamins. So it packs a lot more nutrition. It's better for our digestive health. So when you can, lean towards that 100% whole wheat option. I'm just using Arnold brand bread today, but you're welcome to use whatever kind you want. I like their bread because it is a wider slice, which I think works well for the sandwiches we're making today. For now, though, I'm going to set that piece of bread back to the side, and we're going to turn our attention to our broccoli, the star of today's show. Like I said, I've preheated the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll want to go ahead and start doing that now. It will take a little bit of time. And what we're going to do is we are going to chop the broccoli up into small florets. So this is just a broccoli crown. We want to chop it into very small florets. If you want, you can buy pre-chopped broccoli. It's more expensive. It's up to you if you want to save a little bit of time though, but it's really not too complicated to cut this. I've gone ahead and rinsed it thoroughly. And what we're going to do next is just cut the big stem off, the big thick part that's not very fun to eat. It technically is edible, but most people will remove that and we'll set it to the side. And what we're going to do from here is if you think about broccoli, every time you cut one of those stems off, it kind of continues in that pattern as you get to the top of it. So it's like a tree with a lot of branches, and then you can cut the trunk off. And then if you pull a piece off, you get another tree with a lot of branches, and you can cut the trunk off. So we're going to continue doing that in order to chop this up. So after that first cut, just to give you an example, I'm going to pull a couple pieces off and show you what I'm doing. Essentially, I'm going to make a cut as close to the top as possible without cutting off any of those little green parts. And then I'll just run the knife through the middle to cut it in half. And then I'm going to continue that process till I get a size that I like. Now, there's no perfect measurement here. The smaller the piece, the faster it will cook, and it'll get more well done, which I think is ideal for this recipe. So I'm going to show you the size that I cut them to, and then if you make it at home, you can mix that up. But I think this is a pretty nice size here. Pretty small overall, maybe about an inch or so, and that's a good size to aim for that consistency. And we'll just repeat that pattern, cutting through each piece until we get it to about the size that we want. Now, you can also just go at it and really chop up into all the little florets if you want, kind of running the knife through. You are more likely to get a lot of the loose little floret tops if you do that, which maybe you're fine with, or maybe you want to keep it a little cleaner. Entirely up to you. So let's repeat this process, and let's talk a little bit about why we love broccoli so much. I think broccoli is always a funny vegetable because it's the one used as an example in cartoons and TV shows and movies as like the vegetable that kids don't like. But there are definitely a lot of kids out there that do enjoy broccoli, and it's just so healthy. So if you've got kids, or maybe you're a little bit of a picky eater yourself, it's a great vegetable to work into our diet. And the reason for that is, number one, like most vegetables, it is a great source of fiber. Now, fiber is excellent for us because it can help us with blood sugar control, helps us sustain a healthy blood sugar rather than having like a roller coaster of ups and downs. It keeps it a little steadier, which is great for us. It can be good for maintaining a healthy cholesterol. So if you've ever been to the doctor and they told you your cholesterol is a little high, fiber from food is a natural way to help get your cholesterol to a healthy point. So fruits and vegetables and whole grains, great way to get in fiber, and broccoli is certainly excellent in its fiber content. And then it can also help with feelings of fullness. So if you're trying to eat fewer calories, having things that are high in fiber can be very, very good for you because it'll help you feel like you're full on less food, on less calories, which again, if you're watching your weight or maintaining your weight, that's a really nice benefit. And then finally, fiber is just good for our digestion. It keeps us regular, and that's just a nice thing to have. It's good for a lot of gut health and bowel health. So a lot of benefits from fiber alone. But that's not where it stops for broccoli. Broccoli is also a good source of vitamin C. So we think of vitamin C, we think of our immune system. It's also a good source of vitamin K, which is important for blood clotting, which that's just a natural function of blood there. So it helps your blood stay healthy. And it's also a good source of iron and potassium, which are also good for blood health. Now, I'm getting down to the point where I've cut a lot of pieces, and at a certain point, you may actually just want to pull off the little florets like that, because once you get near the top, you can pretty much do that, and you don't really need to cut anymore. It's up to you, though. You may get to another point where you think, okay, well, let me cut the stem again, and then kind of repeat that process of just pulling it apart. But remember, we're aiming for maybe 1-inch pieces, not too big. What I like to do for this recipe is after I think I've cut everything up, I may go back through, see if there's any really big pieces that I want to cut in half or make a little smaller. Doesn't have to be perfect. The broccoli will reduce in size a little bit as it bakes in the oven. So some of the pieces are just naturally going to get smaller, and that kind of helps us out. Next, we've chopped up our broccoli, and I used one like broccoli crown, like a big head of it. What the recipe calls for is 4 cups. So if you want to make sure you have the right amount, you can measure out 4 cups. 1 cup is about the size of your balled up fist, if you're curious. I'm probably looking at closer to 5 cups here. It'll just vary depending on the size of the broccoli you get, but you're going to be okay if you make extra broccoli. You will be seasoning it and flavoring it in a nice way, so you might just want to eat it as a little snack, or you can just add extra broccoli on top of the bread, whatever floats your boat. So we are going to use this medium mixing bowl and add 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil, giving a little bit of healthy fats, some nice flavor. We're going to do half a teaspoon of garlic powder. Love garlic, so always excited to put that in a recipe. And then we're going to do a pinch of salt. So I'm going to do just like a couple sprinkles here. We don't need a whole lot. We're going to add plenty of cheese in this recipe, so we're not looking to add too much sodium. If you want to measure out a pinch, it's usually equivalent to like 1/8 of a teaspoon if you want to use measuring devices for that. And then we're going to add our 4 cups of broccoli into our bowl here. I'm going to save, since I do have some extra broccoli, I'm going to just move that over to the side. And I'm probably going to use that for a salad later, so I'll keep that. And then just using your hands, or if you want to use a spoon, you can. You're going to move the broccoli through the mixture of oil, garlic powder, and salt so that it can pick up those flavors and get coated. This is going to help it bake. It's going to help it not stick to the pan when we put it on the baking sheet. But then the salt and garlic powder are also going to give it a very nice flavor. So mix that around until you're satisfied. I'm kind of just using the bottom of the bowl as an indicator, and almost lost a piece, and making sure that it's picking all that up. And then once you're good, get yourself a baking sheet, and we'll just spread the broccoli on there evenly. Spread it out into a single layer. If it's stacked up, it won't bake as evenly, so we just want to spread it out like that. And then we will set that in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes on the middle rack. If you have larger pieces of broccoli, it's going to take closer to 20 minutes. If you've got smaller pieces, it'll take closer to 15 minutes. But keep an eye on it. We're looking for the edges of the broccoli to start to brown. We do not need it to be fully roasted because we're going to put it back in the oven in just a little bit. So I'll go ahead and set this in the oven. And I've got my timer set for about 15 minutes. So you'll have that in there for 15 minutes. Then you'll have your lightly toasted bread. And we can go ahead and pull that out and set it over here to the side for now. And for the sake of the demonstration, I've gone ahead and pre-baked some of the broccoli so that we can speed things up a little bit. So I'm going to grab the broccoli this is after it's cooked for 15 minutes. I'll show you what it looks like. So hopefully you can see that. You can see that there's starting to get some browning on the edges. Those little florets are getting a little crispy. This is about the point we want to pull them out of the oven at so that we can work with them onto the sandwich, add some of that cheese, get all that stuff melted in there. Now, I am going to use my cutting board as a work surface. It's got a lot of broccoli florets on it, but that's okay. And we'll just use a piece of bread here as an example. So each slice of bread is going to have about 1 cup of broccoli on it, which is great nutritionally. We're getting in 25% of our daily fiber from this recipe per serving just because of all that broccoli. So the cheese that we're going to use we're going to use 2 types, provolone cheese and Parmesan cheese. The provolone cheese here, we're just going to do slices of it. And you have 2 options. You can, let me grab my first slice here. You can, in a traditional grilled cheese way, lay that slice of provolone cheese on the base of the bread and then put the broccoli on top. The recipe, though, actually suggests if you grab your, let's say, roughly a cup of broccoli, and you can measure that out if you want. Honestly, my goal is just going to be to fill up each piece of bread with as much broccoli as I possibly can because I just love broccoli a lot. And the recipe actually recommends putting the cheese on top of the broccoli like this, which right now looks a little weird, but once it bakes in the oven, this cheese is going to melt and really coat all that broccoli, which I think is a little more satisfying. So we're going to do that, and let's just repeat this process for our other slices of bread. So we're grabbing a cup of the broccoli. And while I'm doing this, I see a question that popped up, and I know there's one I missed. I'll go back and get all of them at the end, but just while I'm doing this process, I can answer one of them. Can you bake the broccoli in the air fryer instead of the oven? Yeah, absolutely. Air fryers are great. If you happen to have one, they can speed up your process for things like that so quickly. What I would recommend doing is baking the broccoli in the air fryer, then doing this step. And if you don't want to bother preheating the entire oven, you've got a toaster oven. You can do the next part just inside the toaster oven, and then you don't have to heat the whole thing. So we're just trying to roast the broccoli slightly and then have another heating element that can melt the cheese. So you could use an air fryer, toaster oven combination if maybe you don't have an oven or you just don't want to go through the trouble of heating the whole thing up. So we've got our broccoli on there. Let's continue to top it with our provolone cheese. And I love grilled cheeses. I had them a lot growing up. It was a very fun childhood and comfort food. So I like recipes like this that let me enjoy the idea of a grilled cheese, but we're making it healthier. We're keeping a healthy limit on the cheese because cheese is delicious, but it does have a lot of sodium in it, and that does add up. So we're trying to reduce the total amount here. So now we've got provolone slices on top of our broccoli. What we're going to do is put this in the oven for 2 to 3 minutes, just until the provolone cheese has melted over the broccoli. Keep an eye on your bread. Remember, we started off lightly toasting it because we don't want it to get burned or overcooked in the oven. So I'll go ahead and put this in. Now, during this demonstration, I'm simultaneously roasting our first batch of broccoli and putting this in as well. At home, you'll just have the one pan to have to worry about. All right, so we'll keep an eye on the clock, again, about 2 to 3 minutes, but the real indicator is when the provolone cheese has melted. In the meantime, there is a dressing that we're actually going to make for this that's really tasty that will drizzle on top of these at the end to give just a little more flavor, make it a little more complex. For that dressing, you're going to need a teaspoon of red wine vinegar, and then just a small mixing bowl that we can combine these things in. So 1 teaspoon of red wine vinegar. We're going to do half a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, just dried Italian seasoning. Another pinch of salt, try not to go overboard, just a little sprinkle here and there to give it some flavor. And then we're going to do a tablespoon of mayonnaise. Now, you can use a plant-based mayo if you prefer. I happen to have just some regular mayo here from a cooking demo recipe we did maybe a couple months ago. I'm trying to remember exactly when that was. I'm going to measure out 1 tablespoon. There we go. Don't need a whole lot for that. And then what you're going to do is you can whisk if you want to, but since there's not that much, I just use a spoon. We are just going to mix the mayo into the salt, Italian seasoning, and red wine vinegar to make a small amount of dressing. We're not making a ton because we don't have like a big salad here. We're essentially just going to do a little drizzle on top of everything to give it some nice extra flavor. I really like the sort of acidity of the vinegar. The mayo adds some more savory fat flavor, which is nice. And then the Italian seasoning, I think, works well with broccoli and cheese, bringing those flavors together. So this is what it'll look like. There is an optional ingredient. If you like a little bit of spice, you can add in some red pepper flakes, which I'm going to do, but that is totally up to you. You can leave that out if you're not a big fan. I really didn't put too much in because, again, there's not a whole lot of dressing, so a little goes a long way. Okay, so we've got that mixed up. Now I'm going to check and see how the cheese is doing here because it's probably been about 2 minutes. It might be time to pull those out. Okay. So just for the sake of time, I think these are good to pull. You can see that cheese melting on top of the broccoli. It looks and smells very, very good. Let me just set that down here. We could have left it in for a little longer if we wanted to get the bread toastier or have the cheese melt more. But honestly, I'm happy with this, so we can continue on. So we are now going to, we have a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese, and we're just going to sprinkle that on top. I think it's fun to have multiple types of cheese going. Adds, again, a little more complexity to the flavors we're working with here. And if you wanted to, you could melt this with the other cheese and put it on before you go into the oven. The recipe actually calls for just sprinkling it on top like so. So that's entirely up to you, however you want to do that. But we're doing a 1/4 cup total, which is about a tablespoon per open face sandwich whenever you divide that up. And then the last thing we'll do, you can use a spoon for this, or you can try to pour it. We're just going to do a little drizzle of the dressing on top of each one to add some extra flavor. Again, there's not a whole lot of volume of this. It's not meant to be really weighed down by the dressing, just supposed to add little accents of exciting flavor here and there. And this little dressing was pretty good. I was actually just, I had some extra broccoli when I made it earlier this week. I was just dipping raw broccoli in it because it tastes really good. So if you want to make a little extra, you can, and then snack on. If you've got leftover broccoli pieces like this, you can just kind of scoop them in there and enjoy that. So we probably could have left it in a little longer to melt that cheese more. In fact, after the demonstration, I'll probably pop it back in and melt it just a bit more. But that is an incredibly simple recipe. You're getting the deliciousness of a grilled cheese with the provolone and the Parmesan cheese, but we're making it a lot more nutritious by using whole wheat bread. Each serving has a cup of broccoli in it, which again is great nutritionally. The fiber from the whole wheat bread, the fiber from the broccoli is really helping us out, being very supportive of our digestive system. The vitamins and minerals in the broccoli is good for our immune system and our blood health. And then we actually get a pretty decent bit of protein from this recipe as well. Whole wheat bread has more protein in it. And then the cheese that we add on top helps us out. Each slice of cheese has about 5 grams of protein, and each slice of bread has about 4 grams of protein. Then we add a little Parmesan, so each serving will have roughly 10 or 11 grams of protein total. Now, I'll be sending out the full nutrition information with the recipe, so if you want to see how it might fit into your diet, you'll have that information available. Depending on your activity level, how much food you need, you may do 2 of these whenever you sit down to eat a meal. For example, I really enjoyed eating 2 of them. I am a little more active, so I thought that that felt like the right amount of calories. But if 2 feels like a lot, you could enjoy 1 and then maybe have a piece of fruit on the side or something else to complement it. But the fiber makes it very filling, very satisfying, and that cheese and the mayo and vinegar dressing on top just really brings the flavor, right? And makes everything very, very tasty. So very easy to make. Really, the time component is just putting the broccoli into roast for 15 minutes. But if you do have an air fryer or another option, you can speed that up certainly. And I think that this is a pretty kid-friendly recipe again, which is excellent. You know, it's similar to a grilled cheese, but we're putting a lot of nutrition in it. If you've got kids or picky eaters in the household who might look at a full cup of broccoli on here and go, no way, I can't do it, you could try to do a smaller amount of broccoli and sort of build up their tolerance to it, being able to enjoy that vegetable. But we could also add more to this if we wanted. I think some tomatoes on top of this would work really well. We kind of have an Italian flavor profile happening here. So tomatoes, either some diced tomatoes or like even slices of it could work nicely if we wanted to bring in a little more color or some extra nutrition. So I'm going to take a look at the chat here because I know we do have some questions. Does it make a difference in adding the extra virgin olive oil and spices in the bowl before or after you add the broccoli? Good question. Not really. If you add it in the bowl beforehand, you can stir it and make sure the garlic and salt is distributed evenly in the olive oil. Or if you want to, you can kind of just pour it on top. As long as you mix everything together thoroughly, the broccoli will get some of the salt, some of the garlic, some of the olive oil. That's our real goal, is to coat the broccoli well for the sake of not getting stuck on the baking sheet, having a little bit of extra fat, and then the seasoning just adds flavor. So you can switch the order on that if you want to. What are other cheese combinations that you would recommend for this sandwich? Ooh, love that question because I'm a big fan of cheese. I think my favorite kind of cheese is pepper jack. I don't know why. I just really like pepper jack cheese. I think provolone and Parmesan with like the Italian seasoning work well together. If you use pepper jack, just in my mind, pepper jack and Italian seasoning is not a super intuitive combination, but I'm sure it would work. So I think it would be fun to try pepper jack, to try Swiss cheese, and just use different seasonings. You can really ship this in whatever direction you want. Like a lot of the recipes we make on these programs might be like Mexican cuisine inspired, where we're using cumin and chili powder. And there's nothing about this recipe that's set in stone. So if you wanted to use like cheddar cheese or just any sort of like a Mexican cheese blend, and then you wanted to do cumin, chili powder, red pepper flakes, and give it that sort of cuisine style flavor, I think that could be really fun. So I don't have off the top of my head like perfect recommendations of which other 2 cheeses I would mix and match, but I think you can really get away with doing anything. It's cheese, it's going to melt, it's going to be delicious. But if you find a cheese that you know is normally associated with a particular cuisine style, then I would encourage you lean into the seasonings that work with that so that you can kind of have those different profiles and just mix it up, enjoy something new. I think that could be fun. Someone else is a fan of pepper jack. Yeah, it's my favorite. The question, would feta cheese work? That is an interesting question. So I have never tried to melt feta cheese before. It's kind of clumpy by design, so I'm not really sure what would happen if we tried to heat feta cheese up. That being said, we kept the Parmesan cheese. We didn't put that in the oven. We just sprinkled it on top. So if you wanted to go for flavor profiles, again, more of a Mediterranean style, you could certainly do some crumbled feta on top at the end, and I think that would be nice. And when we talk about those different flavors, you know, maybe instead of this dressing, you have like a tzatziki sauce that you put on top of it. You could have some cucumber or tomato slices that you put on top of it. You know, mix and match. We're just playing with food here. It's okay if something comes out a little weird, but you're still able to enjoy it. We're looking for ways to get in vegetables, ways to have fun and enjoy the whole process. So yeah, I think feta cheese crumbles on top could work. Can't speak to what happens if you try to melt feta cheese though. That would be a first for me. Okay, I think that's all the questions, and we're just about at time, so that worked out well. So yeah, very simple recipe, pretty, I think sellable foods. If you're trying to convince some other people to have something, again, if you've got someone who's not a big fan of vegetables, or maybe you yourself are just trying to get more used to vegetables, it's an easier sell when there's cheese on top of them. But we have kept the recipe healthy by having the whole wheat bread, more vegetables, and keeping the cheese to a nice controlled quantity. So we'll send a follow-up email that'll have a copy of this recipe, the nutrition information, and it's also going to include a link to a short survey where you can let us know what you thought of today's program. We are always on the lookout for feedback, constructive criticism. We're just looking to make the program better and more fun for you. So if you've got any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. So keep an eye out in your email for that follow-up email. We usually will be able to send that out tomorrow on Friday, and if not Friday, it'll come out on Monday. We do events like this all the time. We do cooking demonstrations twice a month, and then we've got a variety of other programs from yoga, guided meditation, mindfulness, our snack and share support group. So if you're not already on our mailing list, we'd love to have you on there. You can actually email me. My email is rsmith250@gsu.edu, and we'll put that in the chat in a moment. And you can get on our mailing list. So every week you'll get a list of all the different programs we'll be doing. Tomorrow on Friday at 12 o'clock noon, we'll be doing our guided meditation and chair yoga session from noon until 1:30. You can join us virtually for that, and it's a great way to end your week, go into the weekend feeling relaxed. These events are all posted on the GSU web calendar, and many of them are on our USG calendar as well if you're joining us from another institution. But if you email, I see Cheryl just put it in the chat. Thank you, Cheryl. If you email me, rsmith250@gsu.edu, we'll get you on that mailing list so you'll never miss one of our programs. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of your day and an enjoyable weekend, and keep an eye out for that follow-up email. Thank you.